had this privilege. It's good to see you. They're still going strong. Baruch Hashem. When I learned this week's parasha, I had some baffling questions. So, the parasha begins like this: Vahi Beshalach Paro et ha'am v'lo nicham Elohim derech eretz Pelishtim. Kadosh Baruch Hu, the Torah tells us that Paro was the one who sent Bnei Israel out of Egypt, and Kadosh Baruch Hu didn't want them to go through the land of the Pelishtim, ki karovhu, because it's very near. Ki amar Elohim pen yinachem ha'am v'yotam milchama v'shavu Mitzrayim. Maybe Bnei Israel are going to get afraid when they see a warfare, and they will run back to Egypt. Veisav Elohim et ha'am derech hamidbar. So HaKadosh Baruch Hu sent Bnei Israel around and made them pass through the wilderness, the desert. But which midbar is this? The midbar Yam Suf. The midbar, which was around the Red Sea. V'chamushim alu Bnei Israel me'etzraim. And Bnei Israel they left Egypt with weapons, with swords and spears and shields and everything that you need for warfare. Vayikach Moshe et atzmot Yosef, and Moshe took the bones of Yosef HaTzadik, ki hishbea ishbia et Bnei Israel, because he made Bnei Israel vow. Then he says, what was the vow? Lemor, pakod yifkod, Hashem will surely redeem you, etchem v'alitem et atmotam mizeh etchem, that you will have to take my bones out of Mitzrayim. So the Rishonim ask on these psukim, that's just the beginning of the parasha, and they're already asking baffling questions. First of all, Paro was not the one who sent Bnei Israel out of Egypt. HaKadosh Baruch Hu took them out whether he liked it or not. So how can you say Vahi Beshalach Paro? What, he gave them presents, he gave them gifts, he went and did livui. When you have a guest in your house, when you finish the meal and you let him go, you have to do livui. To the extent that you're taking him outside your front door, front garden, to the end of your property. Okay? That's a livui. What Paro took us out of Mitzrayim and he gave us a livui, Vahi Beshalach Paro. So why does it say Vahi Beshalach Paro? Second of all, when it says Vahi Beshalach Paro, why did it say Ha'am? We already know who we are. We are Bnei Israel. Why say Ha'am? What's his problem? Why is it just a nation and not the children of Israel? So it should have said Betzet Yisrael mi Mitzrayim and then Lo Nicham Elokim. That would be the correct way of saying these things. So the first baffling question is, why is it Paro that's telling us out, and why is he referring to us as an Am? The second problem is that the Torah is not really giving us the correct or the direct explanation to why we have to divert to go through the desert instead of going straight through the land of the Pelishtim to Eretz Israel. Because there's a midrash that says there's an 8-day walk from Mitzrayim to Yerushalayim if you go through the land of the Pelishtim. Sorry, to Ashkelon, sorry, not Yerushalayim. If you walk through the Pelishtim. So if you go through the Pelishtim, it's much more direct. So if you want to say, so why is it not telling us the exact reason to go through the land of Pelishtim? Because HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants to do Kriyat Yam Suf. Because all of the amazing plagues that HaKadosh Baruch Hu did in Mitzrayim, and he managed to completely cripple this empire, was nothing compared to what he did in Kriyat Yam Suf. Yeah? They said, Esba Elokim Hi, and we learn in the Haggadah that they either had 4 times the amount of makot, either 5 times the amount of makot, or even 10 times the amount of makot in splitting of the Red Sea in the Kriyat Yam Suf than they had through the plagues. Just I'm going to make a bracha. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam she'akol niyeh b'oro. Okay. The third baffling question is like this. If you're going to tell us that they had to prepare for their long journey, therefore they had to have weapons, v'chamushim alu b'nei Yisrael eretz Mitzrayim, that they left Egypt with weapons, why does it say v'yikach Moshe, that's what Yosef? Moshe took the bones of Yosef. Because these two things are not connected. Why is this completely the wrong place? It should have been written earlier in last week's parasha, when it talks about Vayisu b'nei Israel miramses Sukkota, they started leaving their journey. So say over there, Moshe took the bones of Yosef to leave Egypt. Why now, in this parasha, when you're giving us a sikkum of what's happening, you start mentioning the bones of Yosef? What's it got to do with these psukim? So why is it here? All right, we know smochim la'ad. There's a reason why the psukim are written in this order. We know they have to be placed together to teach us something. So what are we learning from this? Okay, the Abrabanel, Dadoun Yitzhak Abrabanel, he wants to give us an answer to explain these psukim, why they are connected. So we're going to try and to fit them all together, see how it works out. It says the Abrabanel like this. There are three reasons why HaKadosh Baruch Hu wanted us to divert from Mitzrayim and go through the desert. He says like this. When he went through the desert, Moshe Rabbeinu always told Pharaoh, we're going to go to the desert to serve HaKadosh Baruch Hu. If we're going to the desert to serve HaKadosh Baruch Hu, there's a whole argument who's going to go. The men, the women, the children, the animals, not the animals. Moshe said, no, we're going to go with the men and the women and children and the flocks and everything we own and our suitcases and a car, and you're going to give us even more korbanot. So if Moshe Rabbeinu keeps telling to Pharaoh, I'm going to go and take Bnei Israel to serve HaKadosh Baruch Hu in the desert and to offer sacrifices, you can't then walk through the land of Pelishtim, because that's cheating, that's lying. So we can't say that. So that's the first reason. It shouldn't be that Moshe Rabbeinu was lying to Pharaoh. Okay? Second thing is like this.
Why would he be lying?
Because the whole time he told Pharaoh that he's going to take out Bnei Israel to serve HaKadosh Baruch Hu in the desert for 3 days, then you need to go to the desert and serve HaKadosh Baruch Hu for 3 days. You can't instead take a divert course through the land of the Pelishtim. Understood? Okay. Second thing is that HaKadosh Baruch Hu had the chashash. HaKadosh Baruch Hu, so to speak, was worried about our well-being. That if we went through the land of Pelishtim, obviously the Pelishtim won't allow us to go, to just trek through the land, just like Sichon and Og didn't let us trek through their land. And therefore, they would come and battle us. And if they would come to fight Bnei Israel weren't ready for war. Therefore, Bnei Israel would be very, very, petrified and run back straight to Mitzrayim, which was very, very close, as it says in the pasuk. V'karovhu me'od, yeah. Ki karovhu, it's very, very near to Mitzrayim. So he was afraid. There was also another underlying reason. Is like this: that several years earlier, the tribe of Ephraim left Egypt. Several tens of thousands of men left Egypt because they thought that the time had arrived to leave Egypt. And they, sons of the dynasty of Yosef, were allowed to leave. They weren't actually part of the slavery. So when they left, they didn't trek straight through the land of the Pelishtim. And the Pelishtim came and literally shed warfare and killed them all and left their bodies there to rot. They didn't bury them. So HaKadosh Baruch Hu was afraid that if they would come to the same place where Ephraim was wiped out, so to speak, then they would see all their dead bodies lying on the floor and they'd be petrified of warfare and they'd be petrified to go to the land of Israel through the Pelishtim. And therefore, in order to avoid this problem, it would be the second reason not to go through the land of the Pelishtim. That's the Abrabanel's second reason. The third reason is like this. What seemed much, much more important is in such a manner as like this. HaKadosh Baruch Hu wanted to make a complete glorification of his name, which means he wanted to do a worldwide ness that would be appreciated by everybody on earth. The fact that he managed to demolish the greatest empire in the world, as if today he would completely destroy America or Russia and completely nullify everything they have, that would only take you to a certain understanding of his ability when you see it. Okay, today we would see it on the internet and in all the different medias. We would see pictures, but you wouldn't actually feel the destruction in the same way. HaKadosh Baruch Hu, so to speak, wanted to let the whole world feel how great he could be, and great he is, and what he is capable of doing, and therefore to show his true power and his awesomeness. So he wants to do this. He wants to create the situation whereby he's taking Bnei Israel to the Yam Suf, to the Red Sea. He's going to split the sea, and everybody in the world is going to see this nest. How is everyone in the world going to see this nest? The famous Midrash that says everybody who would drink a cup of tea, whether he was in Jerusalem or in London, the tea would split in half. Okay? There would be a splitting of the sea. He'd be eating a soup, and all of them they'll be splitting in the sea. He'd be swimming in a swimming pool, and it would split in the sea. Now, that's one level. The other level is the fact that he was able to combine all the different plagues in such awesome power in a completely unnatural aspect. So to speak, you would not expect there to be all the plagues within the seabed. So when HaKadosh Baruch Hu split the sea and he was able to create all this manifestation of all these miracles under the sea level, so to speak, but above the seabed, was completely miraculous. And that was immense awesomeness that could not be appreciated unless you actually saw it. Therefore, in order to do that, HaKadosh Baruch Hu had to bring Bnei Israel to Kriyat Yam Suf, have Paro run after them to try and capture them again, and then to dunk them all in the sea. So, okay. That would be the first part. The first pasuk, that answers the first pasuk. The first pasuk says, Rabbi Beshalach Paro et ha'am v'lo nicham Elohim derech eretz Pelishtim. That Paro was one who sent Bnei Israel out of Egypt, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu took them to Eretz Pelishtim was the three reasons he gave. Then it says, Ki karov hu, ki amar Elohim pein lechem ha'am. That's the first reason that they're afraid. Maybe they'll run back. And then he says, V'yasev Elohim et ha'am derech hamidbar. That the Kodesh Baruch Hu will take them back through the desert, and we're afraid because he might be lying, so he's going to tell them definitely to the desert. But then he says the Yam Suf, specifically through the Red Sea, in order to perform the miracles. Okay, that's 1.5 pasukim we've understood. The second half of the second pasuk, v'chamushim. Why are they chamushim? When does it ever say that they receive some form of weaponry? So we know from the Makat Choshed, when Bnei Israel went through all the treasure houses of the Egyptians, and before Makat Bacharot, they asked them for the gifts. So part of the gifts was also weaponry, okay, because it was considered some form, it's like a form of jewelry that somebody should have a weapon, especially when it's a master weapon, or it's something that's so beautiful, or something that is excelling and capable of different things during warfare. Therefore, as a form of strength to Bnei Israel, HaKadosh Baruch Hu also was concerned that they should leave Mitzrayim with his weapons. On another note, so to speak, it's interesting because after you've come out of Mitzrayim and you know that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is going to wipe out any nation that starts with you, why would you bother leaving with weapons? HaKadosh Baruch Hu yilachem lachem, ish milchama. So why are you bothering? Why are you bothering holding a sword, Bichlal? Why do you need to lift up anything? So even then, when HaKadosh Baruch Hu did all these nisim were done in order to show his power in the world. Okay, so he did this and he crumbled the empire of Paro. But it doesn't mean you're allowed to be somech on the Nes Tamid. So when they left Mitzrayim, they left with 600,000 men between age of 20 and 60. Probably had quite a few 100,000 more above the age of 60, and a few 100,000 below the age of 60, since they had either 6 children in one shot, or 60, or even 600. But 60 is definitely plenty to have in one pregnancy. So you can imagine if every year you're having 60 children, by the time you left Mitzrayim, you're left with 1,200 sons, let alone daughters and grandchildren. So when they left Chamushim, they didn't just leave Chamushim with weapons, but they left Chamushim when they felt that they had strength as a nation. So he says there that apart from the fact they had strength as themselves as a nation to fight their own warfares, but he adds that Moshe Rabbeinu took out Atzmot Yosef to say that apart from the fact that they had their own ability to fight war, they also had Zechut Yosef with them. But then says the Abrabanel, it's not enough. Even though they had their own weapons and they had their own strength and they had the merits of Yosef HaTzadik with them, they were somewhat still afraid to wage war. And therefore, HaKadosh Baruch Hu was concerned and did not let them go through the midbar. That is the way that Rabbi Nel wants to answer these three psukim and combine them. However, the Zera Shimshon of Shimshon Nachmani has a very, very different way of tying them all together, and I think you'll appreciate this, and you'll be dumbfounded as much as I was. I really love this pirush. It says like this: you have to understand that we have to go through a galut. There's a famous question. It says, how come by the time of Sodom and Amorah, when HaKadosh Baruch Hu told Abraham Avinu he's going to wipe out Sodom and Amorah, Abraham Avinu had the whole argument with him. 50 tzaddikim, maybe, we'll find a good, bunch of avrechim in Sodom and Amorah. Maybe we can get, there are not 50 tzaddikim, don't worry about it. Okay, 45 avrechim, what? Not 45, not 40, not even 10. So there's a whole argument, and there's a whole lovely parsha, and there's a whole way of learning, and with different numbers that he uses, fine. Then he says, I'm going to send your children, your own lovely children that you finally prayed for, and only at the age of 100 he was born, and no. I'm going to send them to exile for 400 years. And Avraham Avinu says absolutely nothing. Not maybe, ta'achem alav, a bit less, maybe a bit, try and be nice. Nothing. He doesn't say anything. He's like, he just accepts it. What do you mean? For your own son, you're not going to argue? So the whole mashma'ut there, that Avraham Avinu didn't argue with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, is because he knew it was for the own benefit of the child that he would go through this exile. The way of purifying Bnei Israel was to send them through the exile. So the Zera Shimshon says, we know that there has to be an exile. We knew that there has to be there, and we know that we know that the exile had to last 430 years. And only at the end of the 430 years was there going to be a shlemut, a completion of the exile, and we would be able to be free and leave Mitzrayim. However, there were several ways to make a different cheshbonot, different calculations how to end the exile. You can either have a combination of 430 years. So the first shita is that 430 years started from the day that Yitzchak was born, even though they weren't actually in exile. The second calculation is that the shibud, the labor was so hard, it was if they worked those 430 years. The third option is that they worked by day and by night. So when normally you would have an 8-hour shift at work, they would have 3 shifts during the day. 1 in the morning, 1 in the evening, and 1 throughout the night. So they would work so much, it would already be calculated as so many years. The third option is the amount of children they had, because it was understood that they would have a certain amount of children, and they would always be part of the exile. But when they had so many children, they multiplied to such an extent that those children took on extra years than they would have had to take if they would have only had 1 son per pregnancy rather than 6 or 60. Okay? So the Zera Shimshon explains that there's an argument between Bnei Israel and Mitzrayim how to calculate this shibud. Okay, and if we don't complete our shibud completely now with the exile of Mitzrayim, we would have to go to another shibud later on, another exile all over again. So there was this conflict. When's the right time to take out Bnei Israel from Mitzrayim? However, we know that since Bnei Israel degraded themselves, so to speak, to the 49th level of Tum'ah, HaKadosh Baruch Hu had to quickly take them out of Mitzrayim in order to save them from entering the 50th level of Tum'ah, and they would never be able to get out of that 50th level again. But when they're only at the 49th level, he can still save them, and therefore it was very, very important to save Bnei Israel at that time and to take them out very, very speedily. So now we have an argument between Paro, so to speak, Mitzrayim, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu, whether it was correct to send out Bnei Israel. So if he would have said, B'tzet Yisrael Mitzrayim, so HaKadosh Baruch Hu is forcing Bnei Israel out of Mitzrayim, then Paro is going to say, what do you mean? It's not completed. You still owe me. I still need to be paid for this exile. Why are you running off? So it says specifically, Vahi Beshalach Paro. No, I didn't take them out. You sent them out. Now you have to understand, Paro, on his behalf, received a very, very big portion of this exile, so to speak. If we know that Bnei Israel, only a fifth of Bnei Israel left Mitzrayim, that means 80% of the Jews died in Mitzrayim because they weren't ready to be redeemed. If so, and they weren't ready to be redeemed, they weren't ready to be redeemed, then Paro didn't have 600,000 servants between the age of 20 and 60. He had 3 million servants between the age of 20 and 60. Therefore, on the behalf of Paro, he was fully paid. But Paro's argument is said, no, it doesn't count because the whole nation needs to be in exile. So it says, "Vahi Beshalach Paro et ha'am." You need to send them out as a whole. You can't ask for any more because what you've received is in its complete form. So he's saying, with respect to Paro, you've received everything. Therefore, since Paro received his entire payment, so to speak, of exile, of the work done by Bnei Israel, that's why they could leave Mitzrayim with the Rechush Gadol. However, later on it says, after the first pasuk, Vahi Beshalach Paro Ha'am, and then it says later on, they left Mitzrayim empowered. They left them with weapons. They were considered Bnei Israel. Why? Because now he's saying that the children that were born, they are completing the whole minyan of cheshbon, how many years you need to be. So for example, if you need to have 430 years, okay, that one person needs to fill 430 years. When two people do 430 years, they only do 215 between them. Okay? If we split it by 4 people, that's only 408 years between 108 years per person. So obviously, there had to be several thousand years that had to be completed. Since there were so many children that were being born and that were part of the whole shibud and slavery in Mitzrayim, then obviously they were doing the hundreds and thousands of years per year and completing these years very, very quickly in order to complete the exile. So HaKadosh Baruch Hu is saying, you agreed, it's on Paro's agreement that Bnei Israel are leaving because you are receiving your full payment of the exile. And we are completing the number of years on your behalf that you need to pay them. So you are going to pay them all the wealth they will receive by Mekot Bechorot, and they will leave Mitzrayim with all this wealth, and you can't complain afterwards. So then, that's the first pasuk. Then why are you taking them out of Mitzrayim and taking them to Midbar? Take them straight through to Eretz Israel, take them straight through the land of the Pelishtim. So he's saying, he's worried we're taking to the land of the Pelishtim, that they shouldn't be worried about going to a second galut. Okay? They're afraid that he's afraid that if they go to the land of the Pelishtim and the Pelishtim are going to fight them, they're afraid, oh no, we're going to enter a second galut now because we didn't finish the first one. And the Pelishtim are going to conquer us and take us as slaves. Let's go back to Mitzrayim. We know how bad it is there, but at least it's something that we know and we appreciate and we can, so to speak, survive it. And we will finish the years and we'll leave the next exile. We won't need another exile. Saying, don't worry, I'm not taking you not to the land of Pelishtim, not to another exile, and you're not going to go back to Mitzrayim to complete the exile. I'm taking you to the Midbar, and that's where we're going to go. We're not going to be worried about exile anymore. Okay? What you've done, you've completed the exile. Further, it says, V'chamushim. They came out with these weapons. They came out empowered. So it said, they were so empowered with their abilities and the fact that Kodesh Baruch Hu was with them, that they were able to so to speak, to fight any other nation. If they had to fight another nation through the Midbar, they would have had the ability to fight them and not be exiled again. So it says V'chamushim. Okay. Then the final pasuk that says like this. It says Vayikach Moshe et atzmot Yosef, and he's saying there like this. Yosef made a double shvuah to Bnei Israel. I'm not going to have one shvuah. I'm going to have a double shvuah. Hashbeah. It's a double shvuah. Now, this is a very, very complex discussion in the Gemara about why you have to have a double shvuah. The other place that we find the double shvuah in its complete form, the way it was worded, was when Moshe Rabbeinu made the double shvuah with the tribes of Reuven, Gad and Chetzi Menashe. When they didn't want to pass the Jordan River, he made a double shvuah. He says, I'm going to promise you, you're going to get this land on promise that you'll come and help them. And if you don't come and help them, then you won't get this land and you'll be punished. So it's a double shvuah. You'll come, and if you don't, you'll get punished. So here he's referring to a double shvuah. It's a very, very, very severe shvuah. And he's saying that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is going to take you out. And he says, Pakod yifkod. Again, a double lashon of saying you will definitely be redeemed. Why is he using the double lashon? And why is in the case of the shvuah? And why is he using the double lashon that he's definitely going to be pulled out of Mitzrayim? Says the Zerah Shimshon that they have to look at the exile and the way it's fulfilled on two behalves, on two sides. The first one is the person who is conquering and he's on top of the nation, and the second side is the people who are suffering, the slaves. So as we explained, with respect to Paro, on his behalf, he received his tashlum in whole because he had 3 million slaves, much more than he would have had, or much more than ever left Mitzrayim. With respect to Bnei Israel, we have a question: was it fulfilled or not? So Moshe Rabbeinu, he went and he looked for a second zchut to prove that Bnei Israel definitely had their time to leave Mitzrayim. When Shevet Ephraim originally left Mitzrayim, they didn't take out Atmot Yosef. They didn't fulfill the promise. So how do you know that that was the right time to leave Mitzrayim? Moshe Rabbeinu went and he searched for where they hid Atmot Yosef. They took Atmot Yosef and they took a metal tank, and they buried him deep in the Nile River. So Moshe Rabbeinu went, he found a place where the Atmot Yosef was hidden. He went and he uprooted them from the riverbed, and he took them with him. So then he says, look, I have Atmot Yosef with me. On behalf of Bnei Israel, that they needed to leave, and that's the end of their exile, I have proof, because I have Atmot Yosef. The Atmot Yosef will prove to you on behalf of those who are slaves and those who are being exiled that we have come to the end of the exile. Why? Because we are completing our promise to Yosef. When are we completing our promise to Yosef? When our HaKadosh Baruch Hu is completing his promise towards us that he's going to redeem us from our slavery. So therefore, says Yosef, Moshe Rabbeinu took out Atmot Yosef. Hashbia, he promised, he made them promise, so they complete their promise. And second of all, Hashem is completing his promise to Bnei Israel by taking them out of Egypt. So therefore, we have a connection between these three psukim. The first pasuk says that Paro was the one who sent out Bnei Israel. Even the Medrash says that he did take them out. He walked with them to make sure they left. Okay. Then he says that they left and with all their children, and they completed their slavery, and they went out with this power, and they went to the Midbar. They went to the Midbar in order not to be conquered by another nation, not to go into slavery again. So they didn't go via any other nation, went to the Midbar. And thirdly, that there's the proof that they have to themselves that they're allowed to leave, and that's the time to leave Mitzrayim, was when they took out Atmot Yosef, and therefore it's a completion of the promise of Bnei Israel towards Yosef, and of HaKadosh Baruch Hu towards Bnei Israel, that they will be able to leave the exile of Mitzrayim. That is the completion. That's the way we should understand these Pesukim. Thank you very, very much for listening to me. Thank you again. Has anyone had any questions on what we said? No questions?
No, I have a question, but not related to the Parsha. Is that okay? Maybe it's related. I mean, why when Yosef HaTzadik, it's buried in Shechem, not in Hebron?
Oh, lovely. There's a wonderful situation with respect to Shechem. Well, I'll do a bit of a recap with respect to the story. We know the story that Dinah was taken by Shechem, and Shimon and Levi told them to do Brit Milah, and then they wiped out the story. They wiped out Shechem. Now what happened? Yaakov was very angry with Reuven, with Shimon and Levi. Why did you do that? All the people are going to, all the nations around us are going to come and going to attack us. The Torah never mentions this. The Midrash mentions that all the nations came and fought Yaakov. And Yaakov says to Yosef, I'm giving you Shechem, kavashti becharbi ubekashti. I fought and I won the city of Shechem with my sword and with my spear. What do you mean? When did you win them? You wiped them out after the Brit Milah. Says no. Yosef was only the age of 9 at that time, and Reuven was only at the age of 16. okay? He had all his 12 sons, and Binyamin was a baby. He's not going to go to warfare with the baby, right? So his 11 sons between the age of 16 and 9, and Yaakov Avinu, and all of the nations of Eretz Israel came and fought him. So he says he won the war and he gave it to Shechem. Now, why did he give it to Yosef? He's given it to Yosef. He gave it to him as an appeasement. When Rachel passed away, Yaakov Avinu was dumbfounded with the fact that she passed away. He was meant to live with her to very old age and to be buried with her in Me'arat HaMachpelah. He was shocked, and he just buried her, where she died, in Bethlehem next to Yerushalayim. He was so shocked by this, and he didn't know what to do. He didn't have like a whole hesped. He didn't give her a funeral. He just buried her. So as an appeasement to Yosef, he says, I'm going to give you Shechem as an appeasement to what I didn't bury your mother properly, but I'm going to give it to you, and that will be appeasement for Rachel. Okay? Beseder. Anyone else with another question? Beseder. Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you, Meir. And there should be a refuah shlema to my brother. Should feel well. B'ezat Hashem. Should get back on track. B'atzlacha. Shabbat shalom to everybody.
Thank you, Rabbi. Shabbat shalom.
Thank you. Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat shalom.